contributed greatly to the production of a classic of ancient wisdom known as The Secret of the Golden Flower. The Secret of the Golden Flower. And in this work, he seemed to indicate to the world that he was basically esoteric about. The years went by, and far from his demonstrating his affinity for the esoteric, he tended to steer clear from metaphysics in general. Nevertheless, his contribution to ancient wisdom has been immense because he has framed in acceptable language today many of the terms that we were struggling with in theosophical language as far back as the 1880s. And so I have to deal with this subject of primarily the collective unconscious and variations of it. The first thing that we must understand with regard to states of awareness in man is that man is fairly new to a physical body. Now, if you don't understand, or you won't understand, or you don't accept this concept, you will always be in trouble in comprehending ancient wisdom. You have to understand that apart from what went on in other planetary systems, in other planetary chains, that here on this Earth, what we call Globe D of the Earth chain, and I refer you to my book Anthropogeny, The History and Origin of Man, on Globe D, man first existed in a tangible sort of shape. He first existed in a mental body. He existed in a mental form. And obviously, as a mental being, not particularly endowed with much comprehension, but nevertheless a mental entity, he had experiences in the environs of the planet, in the mental sheath of this planet. He had mental experiences, as you would expect. And as the years went by, 1,000,000 years or so passed, he then descended into the astral world and began to develop an astral body. That we can understand. A world that was denser than the purely mental world. A world which he had to learn to control, to operate in. And there he had experiences. And so, in these early days, man created vortices of energy, just as you are creating in this life, here and now, and left them behind him. When you leave the planet, you do not leave it entirely unchanged. You not only leave your physical atoms with their radionic emanations behind you, but you leave your emotions behind you, the contributions which those of emotions have made to other people's auras. You leave a lot behind you when you move on after death in a change of state. Now, this was true of the earlier part of man's history. We left behind us, as it were, many pockets of energy. If a poet writes a sonnet, 14 lines of a sonnet, and that sonnet is read by the masses, perhaps occasionally recited, visualized whilst it was being read, then the author, the poet, leaves behind him a reservoir of energy around that sonnet, or leaves behind him a reservoir of energy about the hatred that he bore for a particular person. These things are left behind during the changes of state which we call death. And so there has remained in the precincts of the earth mental and emotional pockets of energy, reservoirs of energy. Similarly, we leave the same behind in the physical etheric plane, the physico-etheric plane, where we now exist. Now, these concretions of energy are peculiar and subtle to our own karma. Everything that we experience in our life is recorded in our mental permanent atoms, our astral permanent atoms, and our physical permanent atoms. And when we come into incarnation again, our bodies are built around these permanent atoms, which contain coded information in terms of karma of our previous experiences. And so we inherit, again, these reservoirs of energy. Now, these reservoirs of energy tend to be typical of humanity, or typical of elephant life, or typical of a plant life. There is so much similarity between the reservoirs of energy which we have left behind on these inner planes or higher planes. There is so much similarity from individual to individual that they tend to overlap. And so we get the concept of a collection of these patterns of behavior that mankind has formulated in his early lives in the precincts of this planet in subtle substance. These tend to overlap, and man, as it were, remains attached to them. There is the individual, and like you or me in our present life, and we tend to remain connected to these reservoirs of energy. And we attract to ourselves only those reservoirs or emotional tones or mental tones, if you like to call them that, or affects peculiar to us. But in general, the whole of humanity reacts in certain ways due to similarity of reservoir energies. Some of humanity, when they go into the dark, are automatically fearful of the dark. It's a natural reaction. And so the collective unconscious of humanity tends to feed all men with energies, negative energies of fear when he is confronted with the dark. And there are many patterns, many characteristic attitudes which we adopt, which are common to humanity. And they are part of an unconscious world that we have lost contact with. And so we get Jung's concept of the collective unconscious of humanity, to which men are attached. There is one person, there would be another, and they share this collective unconscious. The more primitive the individual, the stronger the strands, the stronger the attachments. And so primitive people in tribes will tend to react exactly the same to a given situation. But as a man grows in consciousness, in awareness, he learns a certain independence. And this independence increases life after life. And men tend not to be happy with instinctual reactions to various things. And they begin to sever the connections with the collective unconscious. And this is indicative of growth of personality. We need then to understand, before we continue, what is meant today by the subconscious as being distinct from the collective unconscious. The subconscious is a portion of the unconscious. The subconscious is peculiar to this individual and no others. Whereas we share the collective unconscious of humanity, the subconscious is part of that collective unconscious peculiar to this individual only. And here we have reservoirs of energy which are instinctual, as we call them, which make us blink the eyes, and we don't remember blinking the eyes. Reservoirs of instinctual energy which make us move the bowel. Peristalsis, we call it. Waves of contraction of the bowel which have nothing to do with our consciousness. Certainly, by methods of yoga or by hypnosis, it is possible to dig up this subconscious, and for a yogi to learn to move his bowel under conscious control. and any other function in the body. Swadhyarama can contract arteries or dilate arteries, which average man has long since lost control of. Now, it's all very well doing these for experimental purposes or demonstrations, but the subconscious, according to the Tibetan, should never be raised into the level of awareness unless there is a definite therapeutic value involved. According to the Tibetan, the subconscious should be allowed to sink further and further away from our cognition. And in its place we should bring in something more, something higher. And so we now get the clear understanding of what is meant by the subconscious and by the collective unconscious. We have now to consider the special circumstances of a disciple. What does the disciple have to do in order to search for and to reach to a superconscious? The superconscious, we could say, has arisen, if you like, in a similar sort of way. We have, in the very earliest dawn of man's history, existed in Deva form, in the plane of Atma, in the plane of Buddhi, and in the plane of Manas. And there you and I, as angelic beings, still needing to take on a gross physical body, and an astral body, and a mental body, in our very earliest existences, we had experiences on those planes, and we created there, again, patterns of energy, which are related to the permanent atoms of the atmic, buddhic, and monastic bodies, that skeleton of the soul that we call it. And these permanent atoms are indeed the jewels in the lotus. Very few people know what the jewel in the lotus is. They are the permanent atoms of the skeleton of man's soul, around which man ultimately, by extracting himself from material involvement, builds a lotus, the lotus, the egoic lotus. Until that lotus's construction is completed, that which is known as the human soul, man struggles to extract himself. Nevertheless, he becomes, as it were, gently pulled towards his original nature. And so somehow or the other, the individual has to link himself with pockets of energy in the superconscious realms. And just as these overlap in the collective unconscious, pertaining to the lower triad or personality, there is a collective superconscious which overlaps. And so we get the impression of man suspended virtually between two worlds. We're talking about the disciple now. He is still somewhat linked to his collective unconscious. I'm not going to discuss the dweller on the threshold today. He is still somewhat connected to his collective unconscious, still responds to situations with some sort of common link with the rest of humanity, but less so than ever before. At the same time, he is feeling spiritual urges and is trying through meditation and other processes to establish links with the collective superconscious, which he previously possessed in rudiment form and now must possess in full consciousness. So here is the disciple. This is a dangerous position to be in, as Carl Jung said. Any man who dares to stand up against instinctual laws and to reject them, a person who wants to live by laws other than those which guide all humanity through the collective unconscious, is a man that must be stable. Otherwise there is a chance that being released from these attachments, not knowing how to react to a situation, before he was quite happy as a primitive individual, he instinctually reacted to the dark with fear. Now he is a disciple. He knows that to be fearful of the dark is ridiculous. Nevertheless, he's confronted with the dark and with other situations, and he must find out for himself how to react to them. He no longer has his attachments, which make him stable and primitive. He has given them up. And so this is a period of instability. And it's quite easy for an individual to become unbalanced and topsy-turvy, as it were. What brings about safety with this process? It is what we call in ancient wisdom integration of personality, rounding out of the personality. And this whole process of rounding out the personality ensures safety when we begin to break connections with man-made laws and begin to urge ourselves towards the collective superconscious. And so we teach that integration of personality is a prerequisite before we start to mount a series of steps that leads us into the fifth kingdom. The Old Testament likens these steps as Jacob's ladder, steps of consciousness which we must mount towards the higher world. The ladder. It has been described in other ways as well. We talk of it in ancient wisdom as being the path of initiation. The path of initiation. And we have to tread a path of 5 steps up a pyramid of consciousness in which material attachment diminishes all the time and there is increasing awareness. And we call them the 5 initiations. The 5 initiations. It's the same ladder. Each rung of the ladder is a particular initiation. Or in yoga, we talk about a path strewn with lotuses. The path strewn with lotuses. We're talking about a path that leads to the unfolding of consciousness in Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus. And we begin at the base of the spine with the opening of the base of the spine chakra Muladhara. And we tread this path strewn with lotuses. At first, the opening of the 4-petaled lotus in dark red, and then the sacral chakra, a lotus of 6 flowers, 6 petals in green, and then the solar plexus chakra with 8 petals in gorgeous colors of blue, and then the heart center with its 10 petals in lovely hues of Buddhic yellow, and then finally the 3 head centers. We tread the path up the spine, as it were, of man. But it's the same Jacob's ladder described in the Bible, as it were. We learn to do this scientifically, not haphazardly. We learn in yoga to take the energy of the base of the spine chakra to the head center, Sahasrara. We learn to take the energy of the sacral center to its alter ego, the throat chakra. We learn to take the energy of the solar plexus center to the heart center. Not selfish, attaching love, I will love you if you will love me back, but selfless love. Selfless love. And the development of discrimination of the real from the unreal, the practice of harmlessness and compassion and buddhi. And thus we take energy from the solar plexus center to the heart chakra. Then from the heart chakra to the brow, from the throat center to the ultra major center. And finally, all energies are centered in the 3 major head chakras. The third eye opens, the man becomes a beacon of light. He has reached into the collective superconscious. I have given descriptions of this in great detail in my book, The Psychology of Discipleship, with many examples of famous people who have trod this way. It is said that God gave us roses that we might have memories in December. A famous saying with occult implications. God gave us roses that we may have memories in December. He gave us the lotuses. If we could but visualize the lotuses, if we could construct them inwardly in their appropriate colors and shapes and numbers of petals, in our old age, in our spiritual maturity, we would have these to comfort us. They would be opened. Very valuable hints here. Learn to visualize the structure of the lotuses and in the correct order, transferring energy from one to its alter ego. We begin to understand now how there exists, as it were, this stepway to the heavens, to the stars, to the superconscious realm. There are many innumerable methods which one can adopt to hasten the unfoldment of this divine ladder, as it were. There is, of course, par excellence, the establishment of meditation in our lives. I have suggested on the first night of this festival that you attempt meditation on the level sun, the sun that rises in the morning or the sun that sets at night. That you visualize that sun by shutting your eyes, seeing it outwardly and then seeing it inwardly. This has the effect of extending the ring path knot of man. Just see how the sun's radiant effects go outwards, push outwards. That's the great quality of the sun, expansive love. And if we can visualize the sun within us, we extend our ring path knot. The ring path knot is the limit of the hegemony of our consciousness. A man can only project his astral body to the limit of his ring path knot. The limit of the ring path knot of an individual who has not yet taken the third initiation extends as far as the moon. The ring path knot of an arhat with a fourth degree initiation extends as far as the sun. The ring path knot of an adept of the wisdom includes the whole solar system and even reaches as far as the great star Sirius. Meditation on the image of the sun within brings extension of the ring path knot, enables us to extend our awareness into higher realms. We are stepping up the rungs up on the rungs of the ladder. The effect of doing this is to stimulate the heart chakra. For the sun is the heart chakra of a great cosmic entity known as the one about whom naught may be said. And to visualize that heart chakra within ourselves feeds the heart itself, draws energies away from the solar plexus chakra into the heart region. Not selfish attaching love, but the selfless love of the solar logos, who demonstrates love wisdom in the solar system. The focus of the attention on a retinal image of the sun can be important. To stare at the level sun and then to see the retinal image, not visualized like I suggested before, but the retinal image reflected into the space in front of the eyes, beneath the covered lids, the lowered lids. Now the retinal image brings in the ray of will and power into the individual. The ray of will and power increases the powers of concentration. It tends to stimulate all will ray chakras, and those are ones linked to the spine. And lastly, if we were to stare at the level sun and at the same time to practice kumbhaka, where the breath is retained and suppressed, squeezed on, whilst staring directly at the sun, this stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the most sacred tissue, physical tissue in the body. It not only stimulates the vagus nerve, but the vagus nerve acts as a receptor to solar fire. And so this exercise of concentrating on a retinal image of the sun which is placed there by staring at the sun and then shutting the eyes, tends to stimulate the vagus and to admit solar fire into the body. The vagus, of course, has its ramifications right down into the tissues of the body, and it will transmit solar fire into those tissues deep within the body. We must learn, if we want to work with the forces of nature, we must learn to practice sitting in silence, as I said the other night, and more than anything, to make silence part of our lives, to live the meditative way of life. The meditative way of life. It's no good saying that because you can't meditate yourself, that meditation is no good. You must face this thing. Sometime, somehow in this life. Meditation is not indispensable for your spiritual life, but it is necessary as an admission into initiation and in the establishment of the Antahkarana. The Antahkarana merely being the Hindu description of the Jacob's ladder. Memory of previous lives comes with a meditative way of life. And in the end, you must procure knowledge of previous lives for yourselves. Great strength surges in when we observe silence before a supreme effort, as you must often have remarked yourselves. The athlete pauses, concentrates, stands silent, with breath indrawn, and then the time for action comes. Then he may shout. Then he may do almost any action, whether it's karate, kung fu, or in a bayonet charge. But always, first of all, the moment of silence. The moment of silence when the line crosses for his leap. And the same is true of spiritual effort. You have seen a magnificent example of this in Tamar. I knew, his friends knew, that Tamar was in a state of withdrawal a week ago. Had to prepare for it. And even on the night, last night, before he made his effort, there was silence. You couldn't hear a pin drop. And in that silence, instead of the energies being poured away as they are in idle gossip, the silence helped to hoard the energies there. We did it all instinctually. The same is necessary also when we make spiritual effort. Learn to use the meditative way of life, the silence before the action being the stepping upwards of consciousness on the path to the fifth kingdom. Now, silence is not always available in our lives, but with concentration, silence is made available. I was staying in Fort Worth only a few months ago, and one of my group said to me, "Don't the bombers worry you taking off every morning?" There's a huge Air Force there. It's an Air Force base. These huge, giant bombers take off sometimes every 30 seconds. He said to me, "Don't the bombers worry you as they take off?" And I answered him, "No, I never listen for them." It's perfectly true. Why should you listen for aggravating noises? Learn to be able to switch your attention off. Then you have silence available to you whenever you want it. The Hindus worship the cow for many reasons, but one is because of its quiet, placid nature, and the other is because of its fruitfulness. Quietness and fruitfulness. We saw last night a lovely example of quietness and fruitfulness. One of the great fruits which this festival brought in the form of Tamar. Respect for silence and the practice of it leads us to the meditative way of life. And it is a way. It's a journey. In ancient Greece, the story was told of Jason, who sought the golden fleece, sought the soul. Jason searching for the golden fleece. The fleece is the symbol of man's soul, the soul's nature, its aura, which is golden. He found the fleece where? He found it in a tree. The fleece was in a tree, and one would expect it to be there. The tree, a symbol of fruitfulness. Not only that, the tree is the symbol of the upper worlds and the lower. There is the trunk, there are the branches, there are the roots. If you take the surface of the human brain, you have the same thing. You have the neurons placed there just like trees, with their roots and with their dendrites. The same sort of idea. The tree, of course, was the symbol of the initiate. The Buddha used to sit symbolically under a tree, always. Seating oneself, it was called, a preliminary to meditation, making all quiet and placid before the spiritual effort is entered upon. It means making all still and harmonious about you. The dog to this day still turns by instinct to tread down the rough brush on which he once laid. Man must secure a place for himself when he withdraws. We call it, in my books anyway, a room of one's own, a room of one's own. So we begin to understand more about these stairways to heaven. Socrates called this way the jeweled way, the jeweled way. He said that when he turned inwards to consult his demon, D-A-E-M-O-N, when he turned inwards to consult his demon, he trod a path which was encrusted with jewels. The jewels blazed out around him as he turned inwards into inner space to consult his higher self. And of course, the Christian mystics used stained glass windows to depict just this. And the great Gothic cathedrals which were constructed by initiates, in northern France especially, incorporated the use of stained glass windows par excellence. They were depicting what Socrates was trying to tell us about the jeweled way. They surround the inner sanctum. In these Gothic cathedrals, like the one at Chartres, there is a huge rose window in stained glass, said to depict the 1,000-petaled lotus, to which all of us are aiming our attention. We need to have a correct attitude towards what constitutes chakras or force centers. Chakras are cosmic banks. Chakras are cosmic banks. Every real effort that we make, every effort that has a right motive, despite whether it is successful or not, every effort brings a deposit of some fine record inside these chakras, so that when the life after comes, when we reincarnate, the qualities that we have deposited into that chakra are quickly restored to us, and we reach that level in our subsequent lives. Those cosmic banks are available to us in lives that lay ahead. Each life we start off with the rewards gained in the previous life. Every act of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas is a sparkling jewel placed in these cosmic banks. It would not be so, believe me, if I did not know it to be so. I would not tell you about it. The deposition of sparkling jewels within these banks. Lay up treasures in heaven, says the Bible. Surround yourselves with beauty and you will have heaven all around you for the rest of your days. One of the requirements of reaching to this higher kingdom is to be eligible for it. And eligibility is defined not in terms of wealth. If I had $3 million to give, I could not bribe your way into the kingdom of heaven with it. But I could tell you without any charge what would be most required for your entry there, to have a visa into that heavenly kingdom. And that is purification, the removal of all dross. Wouldn't you expect it so? Meditation provides the silent period of gestation in which the soul grows in silence. The occult law says that real growth of the soul can only occur in true silence. And this is when we hear the voice of the silence. And the voice of the silence is the stirring of the soul and the call of the soul to its personality, the voice of the silence. Of course, you have to treat all gently. Of course, half an hour's meditation is ample to begin with. And then later, half an hour in the morning and half an hour at night. And then 3 meditation periods a day. And this period can be changed, altered, increased as you near initiation. Periods of withdrawal, most important. Learn to cooperate with the planetary logos, for it will be his energies that will flood you in superconscious experience. Ponder on growing things, a wonderful exercise. Ponder on things that grow. I was crazy about gardening when I was a child. 5 o'clock in the morning I would be down in my garden, my vegetable garden, couldn't be bothered with flowers in those days, vegetable garden, watching to see whether the seeds had sprouted, sometimes very naughtily lifting a piece of clod off the top of a beanstalk that was trying to push through, helping it on. Fascinated always in my life by growing things. Only later did I find that this had esoteric implications. Ponder on growing things and you are doing just the same as if you were pondering on the sun itself. And the nadi that is affected by pondering on growing things is the nadi that ends with ha in the left nostril. Ponder also on things that are decaying and the importance of decay in the world. Not only the decaying of plants and the decaying of food, but the decaying of human beings, so that it will help you to understand what decay means. And relate this to the moon, meditation on the moon, the shape of the moon, the implications of the moon, and decay, especially when the moon is waning for decay. And this alerts, assists in the growth, the establishment of the other great nadi, which ends with the right nostril, ta, hatha, hatha yoga, hatha yoga. These are not difficult exercises. The Westerner is able to appreciate them. Don't force any process. Forcing breathing techniques, etc., by teachers who are not reputable can lead to delays in your progress. You are playing with fire after all. Always be careful of your teacher and your instructor. That doesn't mean to say that you have to be suspicious, but you can place yourself in a position of discrimination. Scrupulous cleanliness, once you begin to meditate in earnest. The passage of fire into the aura is something that will be held up, will center around any focus, any nevi of impurity, whether it is mentally, emotionally, etherically, or physically. There must be this immaculate attention to things of cleanliness. Fear is mental and emotional dirt. Yes, we hadn't thought about it. Fear, anguish, worry, these are the pollutions of the subtle vehicles that must be less and less tolerated. What on earth is there to fear? You are immortal. Death is only a transition. Death enables you to grow out of one situation into another, and better able to deal with the requirements of your soul's purpose. Fear produces many, many difficulties. And I think it is the worst enemy of all, because so many people are absolutely hounded by fear. I knew a medical student who was very fearsome of everything. Fearsome of passing his examinations, terrified of the medical school teachers, terrified of everything. And I'd given a talk on materialization at the medical school in Cape Town. And afterwards he came up to me with some others, he drew me aside, and he said that he had seen things materialize on the end of his bed. And he meant it. Things that he could touch. I'm absolutely certain that that boy was a natural materializing medium. That in a state of anguish or fear, he gave off ectoplasm. And this ectoplasm was drawn into the shapes of the very things that he feared most, especially in the dark. Fear causes weaknesses, weak patches in the aura. Weaknesses cause disintegration of striations in the aura, in the etheric body. The weak spot breaks up, the gap appears. A door is opened to possession. What is needed always is courage and persistence. Courage is a reflection of Buddhi. Persistence is a reflection of Atma. Courage and persistence in our lives. My favorite tape is Cowardice and Courage. Should listen to that tape sometime. Always learn to stand firm and unmoved, especially in spiritual matters. People say, how is it possible to be untarnished, to be unpolluted by the work that we do for mankind? We're alcoholics, we're the sick, we're the diseased, we're those suffering from depression. How can we not be tarnished by them? The spiritual teaching is that your feet may be bathed in the mud of the earth. Your feet may be bathed in the mud of the earth, but your head may be in the sunniest spot of all, a place in the higher regions. And in those circumstances, we are not tarnished. Recognition of the filth of the earth does not mean that we have to be contaminated by it. You can spiritually cleanse yourself once you are purified. You can spiritually cleanse yourself in a matter of moments. It's when you are not purified that it is difficult to scrape off the filth that we are bound to be involved in when we serve mankind. The lotus, remember, grows out of the mind, which is quiet, a quiet pool. And therefore every day ensure that your lotus grows a little by making certain that the mind is at least allowed to be quiet once or twice every day. Learn to relax and play. Browning always puts play and relaxation at the head of the list of therapy that you give for any condition. Most people in the West, especially disciples, suffer from disorders because they cannot learn to relax and learn to play. You must prescribe play in your lives. Very, very necessary on the path of discipleship. I want to just read to you Sonnet 94 from Shakespeare, which is a description of a person who is able to maintain equanimity and calm in the face of provocation. A person who is not guided by his emotions, but lives in his mental body. They that have power to hurt and will do none, that do not do the thing they most do show, who, moving others, are themselves as stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow, they rightly do inherit heaven's graces, and husband nature's riches from expense. They are the lords and owners of their faces, others are but stewards of their excellence. The summer's flower is to the summer sweet, though to itself it only live and die. But if that flower with base infection meet, the basest weed outbraves his dignity. For sweetest things turn foulest by their deeds. Lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds. The warning there is that the lilies of the valley are the ones that must be most careful about their purity. The weeds need not bother too much, for lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we understand that the path of unfoldment is a difficult path. Disciplines are necessary. The climbing of the mountain face requires disciplines. The muscles must be developed, the spiritual muscles for the ascent. We must overcome the pride that comes with height, the vertigo, the spiritual vertigo that comes with height. We must be prepared for the mountain face. What a time it is. This festival has demonstrated nothing else. It demonstrates that this is a wonderful time for humanity to flower. For the last 25 years of the century to be that time in which the masters could make significant inroads into human consciousness, could begin to descend from the planes of Atma, Buddhi and Manas and the higher mental down into the world, through the astral world. Human hearts can go the lengths of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring. Affairs are now soul size. Where are you making for? It takes so many lives to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake? The enterprise is exploration into God. Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to meet us everywhere, never to leave us until we take the longest stride of soul men ever took. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.